Thank you, Nina and Ricky. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News on tonight's headlines. The United States and Ukraine have agreed on the terms of a draft minerals deal.
I hear that he's coming on Friday. Certainly, it's okay with me if he'd like to, and he would like to sign it together with me, and I understand that's a big deal.
And the news starts now. The United States and Ukraine have agreed on the terms of a draft minerals deal. The agreement is central to Kiev's push to win Washington's support as President Donald Trump seeks to rapidly end the war with Russia. A source familiar with the contents of the draft agreement says that it does not specify any U.S. security guarantees or continued flow of weapons. But the deal says that the United States wants Ukraine to be free, sovereign, and secure. Thomas I. Likeness for more.
One of the sources familiar with the deal says future weapons shipments are still being discussed between the U.S. and Ukraine. Trump told reporters that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky wants to come to Washington to sign what Trump is calling a very big deal.
I hear that he's coming on Friday. Certainly, it's okay with me if he'd like to, and he would like to sign it together with me, and I understand that's a big deal, very big deal.
So, just how big a deal is it?
It's a very big deal. Look, it could be $1 trillion deal, it could be whatever, but it's rare earths and other things.
Trump isn't saying what those other things might be.
Trump wants rare earths because the American economy is highly dependent on Chinese sources, and it's an economic and national security risk. So, reason number one. Reason number two is that there are now so many American companies who are able to mine and produce rare earths within the US. Reason number two. And reason number three is that, there is Ukraine, and we have these commodities right there. And in order to avoid that the Chinese will take over Ukrainian rare earths commodities and build up potential mines there, it's an option for the Americans. And reason number four is to make the Ukrainians pay for the American military support.
Mines like these that you see here hold the elements that Trump is after. And this deal could open up Ukraine's vast mineral wealth to the U.S. But a political scientist warns that this won't be a get-rich-quick opportunity for the United States. Dr. Jacob Kulik says not a lot is known about the mineral deposits in Ukraine. And he says there's another issue.
A huge problem for the US is that there are not so many American companies who are able to mine and to process these rare earth elements, because since almost 2 decades, Chinese companies dominate this sector. So it's easy to say on a political level, let's get these critical elements from Ukraine. But on a practical level, it's not so far clear which companies, Americans, British or German or whatever companies, will be able to do this right now when the war continues.
And something else Trump should consider before counting those anticipated dollars is the geopolitical situation. Geographer Julie Michelle Klinger says the location of those mineral deposits in Ukraine could hinder American access.
The elements that are under question with respect to Ukraine are currently located in areas that are Russia controlled, right? And so gaining or regaining access to those deposits, not only for the U.S., for Ukraine and Western allies, is something that has larger geopolitical significance.
But that doesn't seem to concern Trump. He says he's willing to do a deal with Moscow as well.
I'd like to buy minerals on Russian land too, if we can. The rare earth. They have very good rare earth also. They both do, I would say that, and oil and gas. Look, it's a great thing if we sell this. It's great for Russia too, because we can do deals there. They have very valuable land that isn't utilized. So something like that could take place.
There's still the issue of security in Ukraine. Some European countries have said they would be willing to provide peacekeeping forces. Trump said on Monday that Moscow would accept such peacekeepers, but The Kremlin denied that a day later.
United States to try to extract $500 billion in mineral resources from Ukraine after giving Ukraine about $60 billion in aid is an absolute absurdity. Not only is it obviously completely lopsided, but we need to keep in mind that Ukraine has been defending the United States and our West European allies and our European allies more generally from Russian aggression ever since Russia invaded Ukraine for the second time in 2022. The Ukrainians have been doing the fighting and dying. All we've done is provide some aid, which is a pittance compared to what we've gotten from them, which is defending Europe against Russian aggression.
There's no commitment yet from the U.S. as to whether it will deploy troops in Ukraine. For the rest of the week, Trump's receiving room at the White House is going to be busy. Today, he hosts British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and tomorrow, it's Zelensky who will come calling to sign the minerals deal. Thomas I. Likeness, NET25 World News.
Now, what does Vladimir Putin really want in Ukraine? What would a peace deal look like on his terms? Russian President Vladimir Putin has been vocal about his vision for peace in Ukraine, emphasizing direct negotiations with the United States. In a recent statement, he addressed Europe's role, suggesting that while their involvement is welcome, they had previously withdrawn from discussions.
Their participation in the negotiation process is in demand, of course. We never refused. We had constant discussions with them. At some point, under all sorts of far-fetched ideas to defeat Russia on the battlefield, they themselves refused to have contacts with us. If they want to come back, they are welcome.
Putin's recent media engagement, including yesterday's interview, signals he expects positive outcomes. He's ready to talk with Trump and senses an opportunity for a deal that favors Moscow, one delivered on Putin's terms. So what exactly is he aiming for? His statements, along with those from Kremlin officials, provide some insights. On Europe, Putin blames them for cutting diplomatic contact and now refuses to make concessions.
I don't see anything wrong here, Europe's participation in the negotiations on Ukraine. Well, probably no one here can demand anything, especially from Russia. Let them demand it from someone else.
Putin's message to European leaders, claiming any peace deal must address their security concerns, is dismissive. Meanwhile, Europe's alliance with America is in flux. Trump's pivot has raised questions about NATO's future, and Russia will try to exploit this divide. On security guarantees, a key demand from Zelensky, who wants Western troops protecting Ukraine, Trump has claimed Putin is open to European troops in Ukraine.
Will you convince Vladimir Putin to accept the European troops as peacekeeper, what do you think?
Yeah, he will accept that.
He will accept
I've
it?
asked him that question.
You talked to me?
I've asked him that question.
He said yes?
going to lift the block on the
Because he's not, look, if we do this deal, he's not looking for war, he doesn't mind, but I've specifically asked him that question. He has no problem with it.
Is France going to lift?
But Russian officials tell a different story.
Мы объяснили нашим сегодняшним коллегам, что
We explained to our colleagues today what President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly stressed, that the expansion of NATO, the absorption of Ukraine by the North Atlantic Alliance, is a direct threat to the interests of the Russian Federation, a direct threat to our sovereignty. We explained today that the appearance of armed forces from the same NATO countries, but under a false flag, under the flag of the European Union or under national flags, does not change anything in this regard. Of course, this is unacceptable to us.
Russia doesn't want NATO in its backyard. It's one of the primary reasons Putin went to war in Ukraine. In fact, he wants NATO to withdraw from Eastern Europe, a demand Moscow made during talks with America and Saudi Arabia as a precaution to normalizing relations. Looking at the bigger picture, Russia has three broad demands: no Western troops in Ukraine, no concessions to Europe, no NATO in Eastern Europe. All point to one goal: Putin wants Ukraine isolated and firmly outside the Western orbit. Russia currently controls around 20% of the Ukrainian territory and is unlikely to give it up, ensuring long-term leverage over Kiev even after any peace deal. The Russian president believes he can achieve this through direct negotiations with the U.S. And unlike Trump, Putin appears to be in no rush.
The first step should be devoted to increasing the level of trust between the two countries. That's exactly what we were doing in Riyadh. This is what the next, maybe other high-level contacts will be dedicated to. Without this, it is impossible to resolve any issue, including an issue as complex and acute as the Ukrainian crisis.
Trump clearly wants a swift deal on Ukraine, a quick foreign policy win. But Moscow is playing hardball, proving once again to be masters of strategic patience, with Vladimir Putin dictating both the terms and pace of these peace talks.
You know, the notion that somehow Putin's going to take what he's got and then go home and take his toys and go home and be fine is absolute nonsense. What Putin's going to do is take what he can get now, then he's going to go home and he's going to rearm. He's going to try to, seek whatever economic recovery he can do, and he will begin in short order to start the pressure on Ukraine again in anticipation of another invasion. This is going to happen. Putin says it's going to happen. He's been saying this is going to happen for a long time. And if we don't take him seriously and take him at his word, we're making a huge mistake.
In a significant shift, the United States has altered its stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, on Monday, marking the third anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the UN General Assembly voted on a resolution condemning Russian aggression and demanding the withdrawal of troops from Ukraine. Here's more. The UN resolution explicitly condemned Russian aggression and demanded withdrawal of troops from Ukraine. While 93 countries backed this resolution, 18 opposed it, including the United States, finding itself alongside Russia, North Korea, Belarus, and Mali. It's important to note that abstention was an option. The U.S. made a deliberate decision to reject the resolution rather than abstain, signaling what many see as clear support for Russia's position.
A simple, historic statement from the General Assembly that looks forward, not backwards. A resolution focused on one simple idea: ending the war. A path to peace is possible.
Now, prior to the vote, Washington lobbied Western allies to reject the resolution in favor of their own alternative, a weaker draft that notably omitted any mention of Russian aggression. Now, this American draft focused on vague peace terms, but Europe and Ukraine refused to support it.
Today, Ukraine fights not only for its own independence, but for a world of nations that are not divided into predators and prey, where no zones of conflict, of influence, and gray zones exist. We're fighting for a world which cannot be divided by another Molotov-Ribbentrop pact. We stand up for the world where future of a nation cannot be determined by another Yalta conference.
While the General Assembly passed the original resolution, the U.S. found success in the Security Council. For the first time since 2022, the Security Council adopted America's alternative resolution with 10 members supporting it. 5 nations abstained, all U.S. allies, Britain, France, Denmark, Greece, and Slovenia.
It is a first step, but a crucial one of which we should all be proud. Now we must use it to build a peaceful future for Ukraine, Russia, and the international community.
Russia welcomed this diplomatic shift. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov stated,
We see that the United States is taking a much more balanced position, which really helps the efforts aimed at resolving the conflict in Ukraine. We certainly welcome this. We believe that such a balanced position speaks of a real desire to contribute to a settlement. As for the Europeans, of course, the statements made from Brussels and so on, including from Kiev yesterday, they do not yet signal a balance. But perhaps, based on the results of contacts between Europeans and Americans, Europe will somehow gravitate towards a greater balance.
Two significant trends are emerging here. First, the U.S. is not distancing itself from Ukraine, but actively embracing a position closer to Russia's. Second, overall global support for Kiev appears to be declining. Looking at comparable UN resolutions, in March 2022, 141 countries supported Ukraine with only 5 opposing and 35 abstaining. Now, yesterday's numbers show a marked decline, 93 supporting, 18 opposing, and 65 abstaining. While the majority still opposes Russia's actions, support for Ukraine has clearly diminished. This could be attributed to war fatigue, the Trump administration's influence, or growing sentiment that the conflict needs resolution regardless of terms. President Vladimir Putin is eager to advance peace talks but wants to keep them exclusive. Putin appears to prefer direct negotiations with President Trump while excluding European voices that might take a harder line.
Потому что для того, чтобы решать сложные и даже острые вопросы, в том числе на украинском треке, и Россия, и Соединенные Штаты должны сделать первый шаг. В чем он заключается? Этот первый шаг должен быть посвящен повышению уровня доверия между обоими государствами. Вот именно этим мы и занимались в Ар-Рияде. Именно этому будут посвящены ближайшие, может быть, другие контакты на высоком уровне. Без этого невозможно решать не решить ни один вопрос, в том числе и вопрос такой сложный, острый, как украинский кризис. Но при чем здесь европейцы? Это касается двухсторонних российско-американских отношений. Они нам здесь зачем? Чем они здесь будут заниматься? А на этих...
And President Trump seems receptive to this approach.
But I think it's very much to the benefit of this tremendous distrust on both sides. That's why it's good that I'm coming in now. But I think it's to the very much benefit of Russia to make a deal and to go on with leading Russia in a very positive way. That's what you have to do. But I really believe that he wants to make a deal. Maybe wrong, but I believe he wants to make a deal.
Meanwhile, Europe continues to show solidarity with Ukraine through demonstrations in Warsaw, Berlin, Paris, and elsewhere. The EU also held a moment of silence, even as their diplomatic influence in resolving the conflict appears increasingly marginalized. In the latest escalation, Russian forces launched nearly 200 drones overnight, primarily targeting the Kiev region and key energy facilities in eastern Ukraine. Russia has ramped up its nightly drone strikes in recent weeks, with Sunday's assault setting a record of 267 drones in 3 years of conflict. According to Ukraine's Air Force, of the 177 drones in this most recent attack, 110 were shot down, while 66 were neutralized through electronic warfare. The strikes hit several regions, including Kiev, Kharkiv, Kirovarad, and Sumy. Ukraine's largest private energy company, DTEK, confirmed damage to an energy facility in the southeastern Dnipropetrovsk region, though they provided few details. Russian attacks, which last year focused on Ukraine's electricity grid, have now increased targeted gas storage facilities and production fields. Tragically, a drone attack in the Kiev region claimed 1 life, injured at least 2 others, and set several houses on fire.
We heard a sound fitting for a Shahid drone. It got closer, closer, closer. I started screaming children to the corridor, now. They ran out and there was an explosion. Something started falling from the exterior of the house. I thought that our house was hit. Husband said no, it is the house across the street, it is on fire. My first thought was let there be no one in there. Turned out, there was a woman. It is such a pity. It is very scary. But we will win for sure and everything will be all right.
North Korea leader Kim Jong-un called for building a strong, modern army to cope with any war during a visit to a military academy. Kim's Tuesday trip to the Kangkon Military Academy comes after North Korea has sent thousands of troops to Russia to support its war against Ukraine. Now this week, Kim also visited the Kim Il-sung University of Politics, another elite cadre training institution, calling for military loyalty and sacrifice. South Korea's intelligence agency has said Kim's previous inspections of military units and training might be part of preparations for an additional dispatch of soldiers to Russia. Now, in this video footage aired by the North State Television KRT, Kim inspected facilities and training sessions for students at the Kangkon Military Academy. Now, Kim laid out tasks to refurbish the facilities and intensify education, focusing on practice so that the students would learn about the actual experiences of modern warfare and master the rapidly advanced weapons. China's government fired back at Taiwan over the latest incident involving an undersea communications cable. Beijing claims that Taiwan is manipulating the situation and casting aspersions, insisting that the facts are clear. Taiwan, which China considers part of its territory, has repeatedly raised concerns about what it calls gray zone activities by China. Actions like balloon overflights and sand dredging meant to pressure the island without a direct confrontation. Adding to the tension, Taiwan's Coast Guard detained a cargo ship linked to China on Tuesday after an undersea cable near the Penghu Islands in the sensitive Taiwan Strait was severed. Zhu Fenglian, a spokesperson for China's Taiwan Affairs Office, told reporters in Beijing that damage to undersea cables is nothing new, noting that such common maritime accidents occur over 100 times a year worldwide.
There are over 100 incidents of submarine optical cables incurring damage that happen around the world every year, which is a common maritime accident. While the basic facts and the people responsible for the accident have not yet been clarified, the Democratic Progressive Party authorities have deliberately exaggerated the situation in an attempt at political manipulation, which will not enjoy popular support.
A large power outage struck vast swaths of Chile on Tuesday, interrupting mining operations in the world's biggest copper producer. The blackout left residents of Santiago without electricity. Jay Suarez has more.
This is what it looks like in Santiago, the capital. These escalators ground to a halt. The lights went out. Stores and restaurants could not do business without electricity. Street lights didn't work, and sirens from emergency vehicles blared across the city. The Santiago Metro, which transports millions of passengers, shut down, and people had to rely on buses instead. Passengers had to be evacuated from stalled trains. The head of Chile's National Electricity Coordinator, Ernesto Huber, couldn't say when electrical service would be completely restored, but he says the power has started to come back on in parts of northern and southern Chile. Chile's Interior Minister, Carolina Toja, says a transmission line failure in the country's north caused the outage. Authorities have ruled out a cyber attack. The outage affected areas from the mining-intensive north to the central and southern regions that are home to most of the population, including capital Santiago. Mines use backup generators to keep their operations going.
At this time, of the 8 million households that were without electricity, about half have been gradually regaining power, but in an unstable way. Of course, we will continue monitoring the situation so that the power companies restore services for each of the households in Chile as soon as possible, because we know that this situation is still unstable. As a government, we have the duty to be very much on top of this.
Jay Suarez for NET25 World News.
The Republican-controlled U.S. House of Representatives late on Tuesday advanced President Trump's tax cut and border security agenda, delivering a major boost to his 2025 priorities. Ryan Chang has more.
217, the nays are 215. President Donald Trump's tax cut plan cleared a major hurdle Tuesday as it narrowly passed the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. The budget resolution called for $4.5 trillion in tax cuts and $2 trillion in spending cuts spread out over 10 years. That would help Trump pay for his 2025 priorities: deporting illegal migrants in the U.S., securing the border, deregulating energy, and other items. Speaker Mike Johnson spoke after the bill's passage.
We have a lot of hard work ahead of us, but we are going to deliver the America First agenda. We're going to deliver all of it, not just parts of it, and this was the first step in that process.
Tuesday's vote sends the budget resolution to the Senate, also controlled by the GOP. But before the final House vote to advance it, Republican leaders had to spend hours corralling holdouts to back the move. Some hardliners felt the cuts didn't go far enough, while other lawmakers were concerned about their impact on social programs. Johnson had to maneuver and cancel the budget vote when it lacked votes to pass, then reversed course. Republican leaders said Trump had to personally intervene and tell reluctant members about the need to advance his tax cut plan. Last week, doubts about House Republican unity had prompted Senate Republicans to enact their own $340 billion budget resolution as a Plan B. However, both chambers must pass the same budget resolution to unlock a parliamentary tool called reconciliation, where they won't need support from Democrats. Republicans will need that later this year to circumvent opposition and the Senate filibuster to enact legislation containing the Trump agenda. Earlier on Tuesday, protesters rallied outside the Department of Health and Human Services against proposals in Trump's tax plan to cut federal grant funding for universities, medical centers, and other research institutions. Speaking on the steps of Congress, House Dems said they wouldn't support the bill, which Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said included the largest Medicaid cut in American history. No Democrats supported the measure.
U.S. President Donald Trump will end the United States Immigrant Investor Visa Program, known as the EB-5 program. That is according to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick on Tuesday.
Exactly.
So the EB-5 program was really, you lend some money, but it was full of nonsense, make-believe, and fraud, and it was a way to get a green card that was low-priced. So the president said, rather than having this sort of ridiculous EB-5 program, we're going to end the EB-5 program. We're going to replace it with the Trump Gold Card, which is really a green card gold. So they'll be able to pay $5 million to the U.S. government. They'll have to go through vetting, of course. We're going to make sure they're wonderful, world-class global citizens. They can come to America. The president can give them a green card, and they can invest in America, and we can use that money to reduce our deficit. Why do we give out lotteries of green cards? Why do we give out EB-5 for green cards? The President of the United States understands that the right answer is, why don't we eliminate the deficit of the United States of America?
Now, in a bid to attract immigrants with money, U.S. President Donald Trump is proposing a new kind of entry visa. Trump's so-called gold card will be sold to prospects that can't create jobs. Arlene Ocampo has more.
Only the wealthy need apply. President Donald Trump's gold card comes with a path to citizenship and a $5 million price tag. He says it will replace the existing program for overseas investors.
It's going to be a route to citizenship, and wealthy people will be coming into our country by buying this card. They'll be wealthy, and they'll be successful, and they'll be spending a lot of money and paying a lot of taxes and employing a lot of people. And we think it's going to be extremely successful. Never been done before or anything like this, but it's something that we're going to be putting out over the next, would you say, 2 weeks, Howard?
Trump is also targeting major corporations who can buy the cards for foreign students at top American universities that they want to hire. And the president figures there will be a big demand for his gold cards.
And we'll be able to sell maybe 1 million of these cards, maybe more than that. And if you add up the numbers, they're pretty good. As an example, 1 million cards would be worth $5 trillion. $5 trillion.
Wow.
And if you sell 10 million of the cards, that's a total of $50 trillion.
And what about Russian oligarchs? Would they be eligible to buy a card?
Yeah, possibly. Hey, I know some Russian oligarchs that are very nice people. It's possible. They're not quite as wealthy as they used to be. They're not as wealthy as they used to be. I think they can afford $5 million.
Trump figures the cards will go on sale in about 2 weeks. Arlene Ocampo for NET25 World News.
And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back. A sad story from Paris. Police say a newborn baby is dead after being thrown out of a window of a hotel in Paris. A young American woman believed to be the mother of the child has been taken into custody. Estela Dominique has more.
The tragedy happened Monday at this hotel on the outskirts of Paris. The prosecutor's office says the 18-year-old mother of the child had been in Paris with a group of young adults traveling in Europe. Local media reports say the baby had been thrown from a second-floor window of the hotel. Paramedics rushed the badly injured infant to hospital, where doctors pronounced the child dead. Before her arrest, the mother had been taken to hospital for emergency treatment following childbirth.
I have sleep, but in 7 o'clock, two firemen go in my hotel number and knock at my door and say, I must check your number. Yes, and he's check my number and go in on the number.
Authorities are investigating the crime as a homicide on a minor under the age of 15. Denial of pregnancy is being considered as a possible motive. The U.S. Embassy in Paris is monitoring the case. Estela Dominique for NET25 World News.
Thieves in Colorado faked a medical emergency when they held up a pet store. Their target wasn't money, but a couple of puppies worth more than $8,000. Julian Bukayan has that story.
The whole doggone caper has been captured on surveillance video. A trio of thieves went into the store in the small community of Centennial, about 25 kilometers from Denver. One of the culprits faked a seizure. That distracted store employees long enough for another robber to grab a couple of bulldog puppies from a cage. Two of the three suspects managed to get away. Police responding to the scene arrested the man who faked the seizure. The purloined pooches had a value of more than $8,000. One of the puppies has been returned to the store by a woman who bought it from a street vendor for $1,500. That's well below the pet store price of more than $4,300. The whereabouts of the second pup is not known. Julian Bukayan for NET25 World News.
And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you for joining us. Good night.